Hi ladies, welcome to Stoic Women, where fearless hearts meet focused minds. Have you ever wondered what really happens when you stop talking to a man? What's going on in his mind when your texts, calls, and energy suddenly vanish? Does he notice? Does he care? And more importantly, how does it change the dynamic between you two? These are questions so many women grapple with, especially when they're caught up in the tiring cycle of chasing someone who seems to take their attention for granted. Here's the truth. The moment you pull back, everything changes. What you may not realize is that your silence triggers a ripple effect, sparking psychological and emotional responses that can shape how he sees both you and himself. This isn't about playing games. It's about reclaiming your power, prioritizing your self-worth, and allowing the relationship dynamic to reveal what's really there. The problem is, we've been led to believe a dangerous myth for far too long. The idea that the more you give, the more you'll get in return. But what if the opposite is true? What if the moment you stop chasing is precisely when you begin to gain clarity and confidence? Not just about how he feels, but about who you are. This isn't merely a tactic, it's a transformation. Today, we'll delve into 8 things a man will do when you stop talking to him. Each reaction provides insight into his character, emotions, and the dynamic you share. But this isn't just about him. It's about you stepping into your own power. So if you've been curious about what happens when you pull away, get ready for perspectives that could fundamentally shift your approach to relationships. Let's dive in, starting with the most immediate response: shock and confusion. The moment you stop talking to him, his world shifts, especially if you've been the one consistently reaching out, initiating conversations, or being there for him in ways he's come to expect. Suddenly the texts stop. His phone goes quiet. That steady flow of validation, comfort, and attention he may have taken for granted is gone. And just like that, he's left thinking, what just happened? Take a second to consider this. We're creatures of habit. We get used to patterns, particularly when they benefit us. When you're always available, ready to cheer him up, make plans, or remind him of your presence, it becomes his normal. So when that normal disappears, it shakes everything up. He might feel a jolt of panic. Questions swirl through his mind. Did I say something wrong? Is she upset? Did she lose interest? That initial shock isn't only about missing your attention, it's also about losing control. Suddenly, he's no longer steering the relationship dynamic, and that can be unsettling. But here's the key. His confusion is his to work through, not yours to fix. You might feel pulled to clarify or reassure him. Maybe shoot him a text to let him know you're still around, even if you're stepping back. But don't. In moments like these, your silence can speak louder than any words. Why is this so effective? Because it shifts the focus from his expectations to your boundaries. In essence, you're wordlessly saying, I'm not here to fill the gaps in your life at the cost of my own peace. That's more than just a move, it's a statement. Psychologically, this taps into dark Stoic psychology. Stoicism reminds us we can't control others' reactions, only our own. So while his shock and confusion are natural, they're not your problem. Instead, this is your chance to recenter yourself and get clear about what you want. Flip the perspective for a moment. What does his reaction reveal about him? His initial response to your silence can be incredibly telling. Does he respond with respect and curiosity, genuinely wanting to understand why things changed? Or does he lash out, showing entitlement or anger? These early signals give you a window into how he handles conflict and uncertainty, a crucial clue about his emotional maturity. Here's something to think about. When you pull back, does he respond with self-reflection or desperation? Because how he manages this shock says more about him than words could. Silence, when used deliberately, is one of your strongest assets. It forces him to face the situation between you, to question how much effort and attention he's been giving, and to sit with the discomfort of not having answers. Meanwhile, you gain the room to breathe, room for him to think and for you to feel. Ever seen this kind of reaction yourself? How did he act when you stopped reaching out? Did it shock you or confirm what you secretly knew all along? Share your experiences in the comments. Let's keep this conversation alive. Yet we're only scratching the surface. Because what happens once the shock fades? How does he act when the confusion sets in? That's when things get really interesting. So let's move on to the next stage and uncover what happens when he starts looking at the relationship differently once you're no longer a guaranteed presence. Once the initial shock of your silence wears off, a new phase begins: reflection. This is where things get truly interesting. He's no longer asking himself, "What happened?" He's venturing deeper into why. The absence of your voice, your attention, and your energy compels him to take a clear, hard look at the connection you shared. And let me tell you, this stage can be incredibly revealing, not just for him, but for you too. Imagine it this way. When you step back, you create a void. That space you once occupied is now glaringly empty, leaving him alone with his thoughts. For a man, this kind of silence can serve as a mirror, reflecting every moment, interaction, and emotion he experienced with you. But here's the key question. What does he see when he looks in that mirror? Does he recognize the time, effort, and care you invested in the relationship? Does he start to regret the moments he brushed aside your needs or failed to match your energy? Or does he avoid acknowledging the role he played in your decision to step away? This is where dark Stoic psychology takes the spotlight. Stoicism tells us to focus on what we can control and release what we can't. While he's reflecting on the relationship, you're not anxiously awaiting his epiphany or hoping for a specific outcome. You're centered in your own power, understanding that his reflection, whether it leads to regret, understanding, or nothing at all, is not your responsibility. Let's dig a bit deeper into his thought process. When a man starts reflecting on a relationship, he often replays pivotal moments. He'll remember the things you did for him, how you made him feel, and the energy you brought into his life. If he values what you shared, this reflection may spark a realization that he took you for granted. On the other hand, if he struggles with accountability or lacks emotional depth, he might brush it off. He may say, "She just needs space," or even, "That's her issue, not mine." Either way, this stage uncovers how he handles conflict and self-examination, knowledge that could be a turning point for you. Now, let's bring it back to you. While he's in this reflective period, what's your role? The answer is straightforward. Focus on yourself. Are you clear on your relationship needs? Were you giving more than you received? Did you blur your boundaries in an attempt to keep things going? These questions matter far more than whether he misses you or regrets his actions. By stepping into your own reflection, you take charge of the narrative. You shift from chasing his answers to creating your own clarity. And here's the kicker. When you focus on you, your energy shifts in ways he can feel, even if you're not in contact. It's almost as though he senses you're no longer waiting around for him to take action, and that epiphany alone can be incredibly powerful. Ladies, This is your moment to reboot. While he's weighing the consequences of what he might have lost, you're celebrating what you've gained by stepping back. Your peace, your power, and your perspective. So let me ask you, what do you want him to see when he reflects on your relationship? Do you want him to picture someone who put her own needs aside to hold things together, or someone strong, confident, and self-assured, a woman who knows her own worth and refuses to accept less? If this speaks to you, take a second right now, like this video, and comment number 1 if you're prepared to step into this power. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss another insight that can transform how you approach relationships. Because, believe me, we're only getting started here. His reflection is just one part of the bigger picture. What happens next? That's when things really get revealing. Hang in there. There's so much more to uncover. Now that you've disrupted the status quo, his thoughts start racing. The confusion has subsided, and he's moved into reflection, but the silence is beginning to get to him. He wonders if he still wields the same influence over you, whether he can draw you back into the dynamic you once shared. This is often where his next move comes into play: testing boundaries. His boundary testing can be subtle or obvious. Maybe he sends a casual text, "Hey, been thinking about you," or he suddenly posts something on social media that seems oddly targeted, almost as if it's meant for your eyes. He could even bring up an inside joke or a shared memory, something that might stir your emotions. It's not necessarily manipulative. More often than not, it's a way of gauging where you stand. But let me pose this question. How will you respond? This moment is key because it's not merely about him testing you. It's about how firmly you stand in your boundaries and values. It's easy to slip into impulsive reactions. Maybe a jolt of excitement hits when you see his name on your phone, or nostalgia kicks in when he references a moment you both cherished. But never forget, your response, or lack of one, sends a message. If you respond instantly, jumping right back into conversation, what does that signal? That he still holds the same power, that your silence was just a brief phase, and he can slide right back into the familiar comfort of the old dynamic. But if you pause, reflect, and answer, if you choose to at all, from a place of calm self-assurance, you set the tone for an entirely different kind of exchange. That's where dark Stoic psychology can be a game changer. Stoicism teaches us that emotional impulsivity undermines self-control. When he tests your boundaries, it's not about him. It's about you, standing firm in your emotional independence. You're not ignoring him to play games. You're asserting your power because you've realized your worth isn't dependent on his attention. Let's visualize it. He sends a text, maybe a simple, "Miss you, hope you're okay." It's tempting to fire back immediately, to let him know he's been on your mind too. But what if you pause? What if, instead of reacting, you take a beat to ask, why is he contacting me now? What does this mean for my well-being, and how do I want to handle it? Whether you respond or stay silent should align with your values and goals. If reconnecting feels right and lines up with the energy you want in your life, you can respond with calm, measured words. But if his message appears to be a test, designed to pull you back into an unbalanced dynamic, your silence can be as powerful as any reply. A key point about boundaries: they aren't just lines you draw to keep others out. They're declarations of self-respect and emotional resilience. When he tests them, he's effectively asking, is she as strong as I suspect? Has she really moved on, or can I still sway her? Your ability to hold steady sends a clear message. You won't be dragged back into uncertainty or into giving out validation on demand. You're protecting your peace, your clarity, and your growth. This stage of boundary testing doesn't only reveal something about him, it also reveals something about you. It challenges you to reflect on how far you've come since stepping away. It prompts you to think about how your silence has shifted the power dynamic, allowing you to prioritize yourself. So what happens if he doesn't get the response he wants? If his casual message goes unanswered, or his social media bait doesn't reel you in, he'll feel the weight of your absence more intensely. He might try harder, sending more messages or ramping up his efforts to capture your attention, or he might withdraw completely, realizing he can no longer draw you into the same patterns. Either scenario indicates his capacity, or lack thereof, to handle the discomfort of not being in control, something only he can grapple with. For you, this phase underscores how far you've evolved. You're no longer the woman who bends at the first sign of attention. You're the woman who understands her boundaries, her value, and her power. And that, my dear, is the ultimate test. Not for him, but for you. As the silence stretches on, the questions in his mind grow louder. His attempts at testing boundaries may have failed to spark the response he wanted, leaving him in the unfamiliar territory of uncertainty. At this point, he shifts into seeking closure, his way of trying to understand your silence and regain a sense of control. Closure is fascinating. It often looks like the need to tie up loose ends, to find a neat, definitive answer to the question, why? For him, your silence isn't just a pause. It's an unresolved mystery that becomes tougher to ignore as time goes on. He might directly reach out, "Did I do something wrong? Why did you stop talking to me? Are you mad at me?" If he's less direct, he might slip closure-seeking remarks into casual chats, testing the waters with small talk, before dropping something like, "You've seemed distant lately." His approach can span from gentle curiosity to frustration, depending on his emotional state and his attachment to the dynamic you once shared. But here's a crucial question for you. Do you owe him closure? We're often told we do, that every ending must come with a perfect, tidy explanation. But real life, and especially relationships, rarely work that way. In many cases, closure is a luxury, not a requirement, and sometimes it's nothing but a distraction. When he seeks closure, ask yourself what's really going on. Is he genuinely aiming to understand and grow? Or is his search for answers more about lessening his own discomfort, a way to soothe his ego or regain control of the narrative? From a Stoic viewpoint, this moment can be pivotal. Stoicism urges us to protect our inner calm rather than conform to outside demands. You don't owe anyone an explanation that would upset your emotional balance. If offering him closure involves reopening old wounds, revisiting worn-out dynamics, or engaging in draining conversations, then perhaps staying silent is the most genuine response you can give. Picture it. He sends a heartfelt message requesting clarity. You might feel pulled to reply, to explain why you backed off, or to soften the impact of your absence. But before you jump in, ask yourself, what do I hope to get out of this? If the answer is tied to guilt, duty, or managing his feelings, take a step back. Closure shouldn't mean making someone else feel better at your cost. It's about creating peace for both of you without sacrificing your own emotional health. That said, there are times closure can open the door to growth. If he approaches you with true vulnerability and accountability, those questions might spark a dialogue that leads somewhere meaningful. Yet even then, you have the power to choose what you're willing to disclose. Here's a truth many wrestle with. Sometimes silence itself is closure. It can say, "I've moved on and I trust you to handle your own path." That isn't about being cold or dismissive. It's recognizing that closure isn't something you can simply hand over. It's something he has to find for himself. For him, this quest for closure can serve as a mirror. If he's emotionally mature, your silence could prompt him to examine his role in your dynamic. He might confront the impact of his actions, taking lessons that could reshape how he navigates future relationships. But if he's not prepared to accept accountability, his desire for closure might morph into frustration or blame. He may try to shift responsibility onto you, saying, "You should have told me," or "I deserved an explanation." That, too, reflects his readiness, or lack of it, to face uncomfortable truths, a powerful reminder that your job isn't to handle his emotions, but to honor your own boundaries and growth. When a man seeks closure, he's looking for answers. Yet sometimes those answers can only be discovered within. Your silence, though it may be hard for him, might ultimately be the catalyst he needs to grow. For you, this stage is a chance to reaffirm your commitment to yourself, to walk away from the compulsion to explain, justify, or search for approval from someone who didn't fully appreciate you when you were right there. Because here's the bottom line: you are not responsible for how he interprets your silence. You are responsible for your own peace, and that's a responsibility worth guarding. While he grapples with the absence of your words, you stand firm in the strength of your own. This isn't about withholding closure. It's about embracing the kind of emotional independence that lets you move forward without rehashing the past. And that, my friend, is where your greatest power lies. Emotions are powerful. They can guide us, confuse us, and reveal truths we often try to bury. When you stop talking to a man, his emotional response is where you start to glimpse his true self. This is the point when your absence is no longer just empty space. It becomes a catalyst for deeper feelings he might have been suppressing or ignoring. Here's the intriguing part. Those emotions can manifest in different ways. Will he react with anger, sadness, or maybe even relief? Each reaction reflects how he deals with conflict, loss, and change. And for you, his response provides a telling snapshot of his emotional depth, or the lack thereof. Let's begin with frustration. It's not unusual for a man to feel annoyed or even angry when someone who once made him a priority suddenly pulls back. He might say things like, "Why are you ignoring me?" Or, "If something was wrong, you should have told me." These remarks may look like concern on the surface, but they often stem from ego. He's wrestling with the realization that he doesn't control your energy anymore, and losing that influence can be tough for some to handle. Then there's sadness. If he truly valued the relationship, your silence might hit him on a deeper level. He could reach out with vulnerable messages expressing regret or longing. "I miss you," or "I never realized how much you meant until now." These moments can feel genuine, even moving, but they also call for discernment. Is his sadness a sign of real growth and understanding, or is it merely a temporary reaction to the discomfort of losing your attention? Finally, there's relief. Yes, relief. In some cases, your silence aligns with emotions he's already been experiencing but hasn't voiced. Perhaps he was already withdrawing emotionally, not sure how to end things, and your decision to stop talking feels like an unspoken agreement. While this reaction can be painful to see, it's also a gift, a clear indicator that the bond you shared wasn't as solid as it needed to be to flourish. This is where Stoicism and its principles prove invaluable. Marcus Aurelius famously said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. His emotional response, whatever it might be, is outside your control. But what you can control is how you interpret it and how you choose to respond. If his frustration takes the form of blame or attempts at manipulation, see it as a prompt to stand firm in your boundaries. You're not responsible for relieving his discomfort, nor are you obligated to engage just to placate his ego. If his sadness seems authentic, consider meeting it with compassion and clarity. Recall that your silence wasn't about punishing him, it was a statement of self-respect. If he's prepared to acknowledge his part in the situation and take actionable steps toward change, there might be room for dialogue, but only if it aligns with your values and emotional needs. And if he's relieved, let that confirm you made the right decision by stepping away. His reaction doesn't reduce your worth. It shows where his emotional priorities lie. Think about it. How many times have you let someone else's emotional state determine your peace of mind? This is your chance to break that cycle. Rather than being swayed by his feelings, remain grounded in your own truth. As he wrestles with his emotions, one thing becomes clear. Your silence isn't just a void. It's a boundary, a statement, a turning point in the dynamic. Whether he reacts with anger, sadness, or indifference, it ultimately serves as a mirror for his own emotional capacity. For you, this phase is an opportunity to practice emotional resilience. You're not being cold or distant. You're simply declining to be drawn into a storm that isn't yours to navigate. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like this video and comment number 1 if you're standing strong in your power. And don't forget to subscribe to keep accessing insights that help you prioritize your self-worth and create the relationships you truly deserve. Because here's the truth. His emotions are his journey, but your growth, your peace, and your strength belong wholly to you. Let's keep moving forward, because the next stage will reveal even more about how this experience transforms the dynamic. As the dust settles, he steps into a phase that's both inevitable and transformative, weighing your worth. This is when he begins to feel the deeper impact of your silence. Suddenly, he's asking himself questions that weren't so obvious when you were always readily available. Who were you to him? What role did you play in his life? And now that you're gone, what does it mean for him going forward? This stage is a kind of reckoning where everything he once took for granted stands out in sharp relief. Your kindness, your energy, the way you listened, the ways you showed up for him, all those gestures he might have overlooked suddenly take on a new importance. He's left comparing the value of your presence to the emptiness that's now there. But here's the twist. The way he evaluates your worth isn't just about you, it's also about him. A man's view of someone else's value often reflects his own sense of self-worth. If he respects himself and treasures meaningful connections, this period of reflection may bring on powerful realizations about how he treated you and what he risks losing. However, if he wrestles with insecurity or lacks emotional maturity, his assessment might be muddied by ego or defensiveness. Rather than seeing what he's lost, he might downplay your importance or convince himself he never needed you to begin with. What's fascinating is how your silence magnifies this process. By stepping back, you've taken away the noise, distractions, and familiar patterns that may have masked his genuine feelings. Now he's alone with his thoughts, forced to see just what it means to lose someone who gave so much of themselves. Let's flip the script for a second. While he's busy weighing your worth, This is also an ideal moment for you to consider his. Did he regularly meet your emotional needs? Did he treat you with the respect and care you deserve? Did things feel balanced and rewarding, or were you always giving more than you got in return? These are worthwhile questions, not so you can dwell on the past, but so you can get clear on what you truly want and need in future relationships. Here's a key insight that often goes overlooked. Your worth is not determined by his evaluation. Whether he realizes what you're worth now, later, or never at all, it doesn't change the fundamental truth that you're inherently worthy of love, respect, and effort. His capacity or failure to see that speaks volumes about him, not you. From a Stoic perspective, this phase is a reminder to separate your self-worth from external validation. As Epictetus wisely stated, know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly. Your value doesn't rise and fall with someone else's opinion. It's rooted in your principles and the way you present yourself. For him, this period can be a wake-up call. If he genuinely values the connection, he may look back on how he acted, recognizing the moments he fell short or failed to show appreciation. That realization can spark meaningful change if he's ready to be accountable. But it can also show you the limits of his emotional capacity if his reflection leads him to denial, blame, or apathy. That's a clear sign he's just not ready to meet you on the level you deserve. For you, this stage is a chance to really step into your power. By refusing to chase, you've shown him and yourself that your value isn't his to define or diminish. In doing so, you've set a precedent not just for him, but for every relationship you choose to pursue from here on out. There's a certain clarity that comes from this phase. Whether he acknowledges your worth or not, the act of pulling back has already changed the dynamic in a profound way. It's not about proving anything to him. It's about affirming what you already know to be true about yourself. While he grapples with the implications of your absence, you're not sitting around waiting for a verdict. You're moving ahead, aware that your worth isn't up for debate. It's a reality you hold on to no matter who is or isn't in your life. And that realization, that's where your true power lies. After a period of reflection, boundary testing, and emotional wrestling, there often comes a moment when he decides to contact you again. This is a pivotal phase, not because of his call or message, but because of how you choose to respond or not respond. His choice to reinitiate contact could spring from a variety of motivations. Maybe he's realized that your absence created a void he never anticipated. Perhaps curiosity is driving him. He's wondering why you pulled back, why the dynamic changed, and whether your feelings have shifted. Or maybe it's about regaining control, a subtle attempt to revert things to how they once were. The approach he takes can reveal a lot about his intentions. Some men come back with vulnerability, openly acknowledging the silence and expressing a desire to reconnect on a deeper level. Others might send casual, low-effort messages like, "Hey, it's been a while," just to test the waters without committing to a meaningful conversation. And then there are those who lean on humor or nostalgia, referencing an inside joke or shared memory in hopes of stirring up warmth or familiarity. But what does this moment mean for you? The power dynamic has already evolved. By stepping back and prioritizing yourself, you've shown a degree of self-respect and emotional independence he can't overlook. His reaching out is an admission of that shift, whether he realizes it or not. Now, your response is crucial, not for what it signifies to him, but for what it says about your own growth. If his message sparks feelings of excitement or longing, pause and reflect before replying. Ask yourself, What do I want from this interaction? Is his message sincere, or is he testing boundaries again? Am I responding from a place of emotional habit, or because this aligns with my values and needs? If you find his approach thoughtful and genuine, you might choose to engage, calmly and with clarity. This doesn't mean rushing back into old patterns. It means deciding how you want this interaction to unfold. Your response should mirror the emotional balance and boundaries you've established. For instance, if he texts, "Hey, I've missed you," you might reply, "It's good to hear from you. I hope you've been well." That acknowledges his effort without overcommitting. It's polite, measured, and leaves the door open for more conversation if that's something you want. On the other hand, if his message feels superficial or half-hearted, like sup, you're fully entitled to protect your energy by not responding at all. Sometimes silence can speak volumes. It reinforces that your attention isn't automatically given. It must be earned with genuine effort. From a Stoic perspective, this phase tests your emotional discipline. Stoicism reminds us to act with reason, not impulses. Marcus Aurelius famously said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." In this scenario, your reply, or your lack of one, should reflect your inner truth and the standards you've set for yourself. For him, your measured response, or your silence, may spark one of two realizations. He either recognizes the need to step up and approach you more sincerely, or he steps away, concluding that the required effort is beyond what he's willing to give. Either outcome is a reflection of whether he's ready or not to meet you at the level you deserve. This juncture can feel bittersweet. His message may trigger nostalgia or a glimmer of hope, but it's also a reminder of why you withdrew in the first place. Use this moment to reaffirm your own priorities. Are you stepping back into a dynamic that respects your boundaries and values, or risking a return to the old patterns that led you to pull away? Keep in mind, his reappearance isn't the real triumph, it's just another step. The true victory lies in how you handle this interaction, honoring yourself and refusing to budge on what you know you deserve. Whether the conversation ends in reconciliation, closure, or simply fades out, the power remains with you. By staying firm in your self-worth, you're not just answering his text. You're defining how you'll be treated from now on. And that is where the true transformation occurs. When all is said and done, the final stage inevitably arrives. He moves forward. But what does moving forward really mean? And, more importantly, how does it affect both his path and yours? For him, moving forward is a response to the clarity your silence has created in his life. Whether he admits it or not, the lack of your attention forces him to confront the reality of the dynamic you shared. In this phase, his actions speak louder than words, revealing how he deals with this new situation. If he truly values the connection, he may use this time to grow. Perhaps he'll reflect on how he handled things, recognizing the instances where he fell short or took you for granted. This could motivate him to make changes, not just for you, but for himself and his future relationships. Real growth is never a given, but when it happens, it signals emotional maturity and a willingness to accept accountability. On the other hand, moving forward could mean choosing not to engage any further. Some men, upon realizing what they've lost, might still resist change. That isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his own readiness, or lack thereof, to evolve. What does moving forward mean for you? Here's where the beauty of your decision to step back fully unfolds. While he's contemplating his next moves, you've already begun your own journey of discovery and growth. By pulling away, you've reclaimed your energy, turned inward, and allowed yourself room for clarity. This phase is less about him and more about you embracing your power. You're no longer defined by his reactions, messages, or attempts to reconnect. You've shifted the spotlight from seeking external validation to cultivating inner peace, a concept deeply rooted in dark Stoic psychology and the ageless insights of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." For you, that means don't wait around for someone else to recognize your value. Live it, embody it, and let it direct your choices. Let's also talk about closure in the context of moving forward. Genuine closure doesn't always stem from a conversation or a detailed explanation. Sometimes it comes from quiet acceptance, realizing that not all questions need answers and not all endings require finality. When he moves forward, you may feel mixed emotions. Maybe it's relief, knowing a chapter has closed, or maybe a hint of sadness, wondering what might have been. Both reactions are valid, but neither one should derail the progress you've achieved. This phase gives you a chance to evaluate what the experience taught you. What did you learn about your own boundaries, needs, and identity? How will these lessons inform your approach to future relationships? Moving forward also involves facing the unknown. Whether or not he returns to your life, you've already changed the narrative. You're no longer pursuing, waiting, or hoping for someone else to define your joy. You're shaping it on your own terms. And here's the truth. As you focus on your growth and self-respect, you naturally draw in people who resonate with your energy. The energy you used to invest in chasing someone else is now fueling your own development, and that shift is magnetic. As for him, moving forward may include waves of regret, glimpses of what could have been. But for you, it's a journey into empowerment, an opportunity to become the confident, radiant woman you were always meant to be. Ultimately, moving forward isn't only about leaving the past behind. It's about taking the lessons with you, using them as a solid base for building something healthier, more fulfilling, and more robust. Whether he evolves because of this experience or not, you've already won, simply because you chose yourself. And that, my dear, is the real victory. What really happens when you stop talking to a man? So, what happens when you stop talking to a man? The truth is more profound than you might expect. It's not just about his reactions, shock, reflection, boundary testing, seeking closure, emotional responses, re-evaluating your worth, reaching out again, or even moving on. It's about what each of these stages reveals about him, about you, and about the dynamic you shared. Your silence isn't meant to punish or manipulate. It's an act of reclaiming your own power. By stepping back, you're shifting the focus from seeking validation to finding clarity within. You're showing both him and yourself that your worth isn't dependent on his attention, effort, or recognition. It's intrinsic, unwavering, and yours alone. What this journey means for him. For a man, your silence forces him into a place of discomfort, introspection, and potentially even growth. It exposes what he truly values, how he deals with challenges, and whether he's emotionally ready to meet you halfway. Not every man will step up. Some will withdraw, preferring the comfort of old habits. Others may test your boundaries or look for closure out of ego or insecurity. And a rare few will seize this as a chance to reflect, change, and finally meet you where you deserve to be met. But remember, his journey is his own. His reactions aren't your responsibility, and his choices don't define your worth. What this journey means for you. For you, this process is far bigger than his response. It's about discovering the strength in stoicism and emotional independence. It's about recognizing that your happiness, peace, and self-respect come from within, not from someone else's approval. Think about the distance you've traveled since deciding to stop chasing. You've created room to assess what truly matters, reevaluate what you deserve, and put your well-being first. You've stepped out of a draining cycle of seeking validation and into a far more empowering place of self-acceptance. Your next steps. Now that you understand the impact of pulling back, how will you harness it moving forward? How will you weave the lessons you've learned into your future relationships? Here's a suggestion. Next time you feel tempted to overextend, explain yourself, or chase someone who isn't meeting you in the middle, pause, take a breath, recall everything you've gained by stepping back. You're not just a woman who stopped talking to a man, you're a woman who chose herself. Thank you for listening. Thank you for investing in your growth. If this video resonated with you, be sure to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. And keep in mind, changing your approach changes your relationships and your entire world. Stay confident, stay radiant, and trust that the best is yet to come.